Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the statement given by the Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi in the National Assembly, where he said that nation must unite for national interest. All the political parties should be unified because this is the time when we all need to be together in order to make sure that peace prevails in the region. Obviously, he did mention about the important and historic meeting of our Prime Minister Imran Khan and the American President Donald Trump, and he said that things were not that great, but now the relationship between Pakistan and United States is significantly improving, and we really want to capitalize on that. And also he was talking about curbing extremism in Pakistan. He also spoke about the FATF challenge, which is a big and huge challenge for Pakistan in order to make sure that we do not get into the black list of FATF. But having said that, now what sort of issues will be faced by the government in this regard? What sort of challenges are ahead for them? And especially when you talk about building consensus or national interest, I think that is also going to be another huge challenge. And then obviously when we talk about the efforts of Pakistan against the financial terrorism, that is also pretty important. We'll be talking about that in our program. Let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio. On my right is Asif Durrani Saab. He's a senior diplomat, former ambassador. Thank you very much, sir. And we have with us AVM retired Ikramullah Bhatti Saab, who's a senior defense analyst, sir. Thank you very much. And we have with us Raja Kaise Saab. He's a foreign affairs expert. Thank you very much, Raja Saab. Now, sir, Durrani Saab, first of all, the kind of approach Pakistan has now adopted, we always fought against the extremism, all those elements. But unfortunately, sir, Pakistan was considered a state which was producing terrorism rather than curbing it. This was the general perception. And unfortunately, when we talk about the loss of 75,000 civilians and armed personnel against this fight, sir, nobody has practically recognized it. This is the first time that when we have seen our Prime Minister be in extempo, and he spoke about all those issues which Pakistan is facing, whether you talk about Kashmir or you talk about Afghanistan. And one thing he said very categorically, that war was not the solution. This is what he's been saying for the last almost 15, 16 years. And he said that only solution was talks. Now, this has been realized by the Americans also. Now, first of all, sir, a quick look at the kind of sacrifices Pakistan has made over the last, I would say, 18, 19 years since the Americans invaded Afghanistan. Whether these were economic challenges for us, or we lost so many civilians, whether you talk about the soft targets or the hard targets, we went through a lot of problem during the last 2 decades. So your take.
You're right, because from the very beginning, I'll take you rather a little bit further, because it's not the 9/11 when the history started in this region. It's more than 4 decades now when the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan actually took place. And that in fact changed the whole paradigm in the region. And if you recall, then these Afghans who were called by the Americans as Mujahideen, and then when they were meeting President Reagan, he called them as their moral equivalent of their forefathers. So they were the ones who actually put up the resistance against Soviet Union, a superpower of its time, and at the peak of the Cold War. So this is a small preface I would like to add. And then onwards, when Soviet Union decided to withdraw, again it was still a superpower, but it had to withdraw because of the fierce resistance, not only inside Afghanistan, but also it was isolated internationally because it had occupied a sovereign country. Then subsequently, once the Soviets left, and there was chaos inside Afghanistan because the Afghans, the different factions which were fighting inside Afghanistan, they were fighting in their own areas of influence where they were. It was not a unified command, under one unified command resistance against the foreign occupation. So what we can now derive now, because it's a counterfactual now, because these Mujahideen actually then they started the tug of war. It was all for power struggle. And imagine that Prime Minister then selected Gulbuddin Hikmatyar. He could not enter Kabul even for a single day because Ahmad Shah Massoud would not allow him while he was the defense minister. So in such a scenario, whatever happened, and then though that setup led by Burhanuddin Rabbani late, who was replaced, that actually then you can say replaced by the Taliban, and then we can see that all kind of groups, whether they were Afghans or non-Afghans, or Arab Afghans as they were called. So they were all there. And no one, even the United States or the West, had any idea that what they have left behind. And this was very much admitted, acknowledged by former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, when she said that once the
She said it on the floor of the House, I remember.
Floor of the House, and she said that once the job was over, we just washed our hands and we left. So this is something we have to remind our interlocutors in the West that you just cannot blame Pakistan. Because in fact we had to clear the muck, which was left after the Soviets left and after the Americans, they washed their hands. And even today we are in fact suffering because of that ignorance, because of that apathy on the part of those superpowers led by the United States, which became a hyperpower and which could not see. And after the 9/11, when they thought...
Sir, one quick comment. We actually fought our war. Were we afraid of the Soviet invasion over here, sir? Or was it, because a lot of people have different ideas about it. A lot of people do believe that we just jumped into this war, even then. But a few people from the military, they said, well, we were ready, but it must have been a huge challenge for our military to stop the Soviet invasion, sir. And that is one of the reasons that we fought for about a year and a half, and then the Americans jumped in.
It was a war thrust upon us. No one wanted this war. And we should not ignore the millions of Afghan refugees which entered Pakistan. And they were a drain on our resources. They are still there. And those are being overwhelmingly supported by Pakistan. There may be problems, but overwhelmingly supported financially by Pakistan. And similarly, even now, when you talk about Afghanistan, the youth which are behind the computers, they have invariably got education from Pakistan. Similarly, Afghans, for their primary, secondary, and tertiary treatment, they come, almost 95% of Afghans, they come to Pakistan. So this was a situation we faced. Pakistan didn't want to jump into that war because wars, the stories of the wars may look attractive, they may look sort of romantic, but actually on the ground, the devastation of the wars are horrible. So we didn't want this war. And then whatever, even after 9/11, whatever we are facing because of some ignorance and some apathy by our friends. They could not realize the ground realities. For instance, they ignored Taliban once the Taliban were defeated. So what happened? They regrouped, and then they
became a challenge for them also.
Yes. So this is very important to understand that, and then blaming Pakistan for that is absolutely unfair, because we are not the only country which has had influence inside Afghanistan. There were other players inside Afghanistan. Even now, there are countries which do not want peace inside Afghanistan. So how to go about that? Then, and no one is talking about their spoilers role. So this is very important that United States and other Western countries, they should also be watchful of the spoilers, whether they are inside Afghanistan, Afghans themselves,
and I'm sure, sir, they must have been
the
briefed.
outsiders.
The people in the corridors of power in the United States of America, sir, I'm sure they have been told what we are going through and what the real issue seems to be. And I'm sure they must have asked the Indians to stay away for the time being till this process takes place. But now, Avim Saab, process isn't that simple. When we talk about peace in Afghanistan, sir, honestly speaking, I do not understand what exactly do we mean by peace when we talk about Afghanistan. Is it a no war? Is that that is something which they believe peace is? Or you believe, sir, that comparatively less killings is that kind of peace? A ceasefire maybe, is that a peace? Or America vacating Afghanistan and Afghanistan actually believing in their own, as we say, Afghan-led and Afghan-owned kind of a formula, and that is implemented and eventually a prosperous Afghanistan maybe in 10 years' time or something. How do you see that happening, sir?
Well, you see, when you look into Afghan history, Afghanistan internally was peaceful before 1979. And there was writ of the government, there was business, and there was tourism. People could travel through Afghanistan all the way.
It was a much modern country,
Yes.
like Iran at that time.
So we have a sample of peace in Afghanistan. And while because of this almost 4 decades of unrest, of anarchy, of terrorism, of militancy, we are not quite not very hopeful about the original state of affairs or original state of Afghanistan can return or not. And over a period of last 40 years, there has been so much of fighting amongst themselves with the foreign forces that it's almost a way of life. And they have probably forgotten as to how a peaceful Afghanistan would look. But the fact remains that we have had peaceful Afghanistan, and I think the endeavor must be that to go back to the same situation where there is writ of the government, there is trade, there is business, there is tourism, and people can travel freely, come and go freely, and do their normal chores of life without any fear. And is that possible?
That's a $1 million question. Is that possible?
You see, we have Afghan government on one side, then we have several other ethnic entities, then we have Taliban. We also know that Taliban are primarily Pashtun, and Pashtun are around 50%, and the other are other entities. And while Taliban have stated publicly that they do not intend to monopolize on power, like what they were in 95 to about 2001 or so. And but culturally, this is something new for Taliban to say, because when they come into power and they like to rule the way they want to, and for that they have to be, in total control. But here there is a indication that they have given that they are prepared to share power, which is a sign of maturity. They have been fighting for the last 19 years, and they have, I'm sure, learned their own lessons, that entertaining, hosting foreign entities like Al-Qaeda can lead to such a lot of trouble, which is going to linger on for 19 years and result in so much of destruction and killing of their own people. And that is why they are prepared to make a commitment with the US that they will ensure that the Afghan soil is not allowed to be used against any foreign country in the region or the world over.
Or against the American interest primarily, sir.
Yes. So that means they have learned the lesson, so they are prepared to share power. So which does give a good hope that that whatever political dispensation that going to take shape in Afghanistan would be such that it will include people other than the Taliban, and which is probably what the other ethnic groups, even the Kabul regime, would want. And if that is possible, I think we can be quite hopeful about peace returning to Afghanistan, because I'm sure with 40 years of this destruction and killing, the Afghan people as a nation have learned.
Basically, sir, this is technically, if you look at the Afghan culture, this is technically the third generation which is seeing war.
So
yeah.
That is why I think there is definite hope, and a much bigger responsibility now comes on the shoulder of the US and rest of the world, because
No,
Afghanistan.
no, no. Talking about the responsibility of US and primarily the kind of commitment Pakistan has made now, that is a huge question. We'll talk about that, Ralsab, if you allow me. We've been joined in by Shabaz Rana Saab, a senior journalist. Shabaz Saab, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, Faisal sir.
So thank you very much for joining us. Now, Shabaz Saab, a quick effort of Pakistan regarding FATF, since you've been covering this issue also. Where do we stand as we speak, sir? How much have we done? How much more needs to be done?
Thank you, Faisal. You know, our efforts have been spanning over a period of now almost over 1.5 years. And so far, the focus has remained on making changes in the law and bringing some administrative and the procedural changes. But when it comes to giving effect to these changes, the actual implementation of the proposals and the legal changes that were made during past 1.5 years, this is the test. And Pakistan right now stands at a very critical phase where it has to now demonstrate that it has taken all the measures that are required to curb the money laundering and the terrorism financing. So far, our last two reviews of the FATF have not been remained very successful. And this is the critical phase. If we go by the numbers, out of the 27 action plans, we were supposed to deliver on 21 during the first two reviews, and probably practically on two action plans which had been agreed, we were able to successfully complete, and the progress on all other 19 points were either less than satisfactory, or in certain cases no progress had been made. So the actual test of the government of Pakistan and its law enforcement agencies is to show that all the measures have been taken. Well, the problem is that we take certain actions, but we are not able to communicate or explain those actions to the FATF and the Asia Pacific group that comes to Pakistan, or the Pakistani authorities go abroad to explain their position. The other issue is the conviction in certain terrorism financing cases. We claim that we have confiscated so much money, or we have traced certain suspicious transactions carried out by these people or the organizations. But when it comes to proceeding against these people in the court of law, we are not able to convict them. So that is a point where right now we stand.
Okay, now the second important area is about the National Action Plan. That is also something very important, and generally it is believed that we do not have many competent people in that department, unfortunately. Is that a correct statement, sir?
Well, you know, in Pakistan, there is a problem in our bureaucracy, and that is to protect our own turf at the expense of even the national interest. There have been issues between the NAFTA, between the Financial Monitoring Unit, between the Ministry of Interior, and between the various law enforcement agencies. There are some agencies that report to the provincial authorities. There are certain agencies that work under our intelligence agencies network, and there are certain departments that fall under the control of the civil administration of the federal government. So there has been an issue of having a better coordination among all these departments and organizations. Probably that has not happened. Although we have a very well-defined mechanism where there is a steering committee which is headed by the finance minister, and which is being attended by other relevant ministers and the concerned law enforcement departments. But somehow we are not able to gel all these organizations and put a defensive, rather kind of very strong defense to these organizations where we can show some progress. You are right. There is issue, and probably the government has done something on this aspect. And because of that, we expect that this time the couple of reports, particularly on the customs and on the listing and categorizations of various terrorist organizations, we will be able to put a better report because of some kind of better coordination that has taken place between these organizations during past couple of months, particularly after the last plenary meeting of the FATF.
All right. One last comment, and that is important in a way because a lot of people are also talking about it, that when the Prime Minister visited America, a lot of commitment has been made, a lot of issues were discussed there in detail, at length. Do you believe that this FATF issue is also linked with the kind of results Pakistan is going to deliver regarding the peace in Afghanistan, sir?
Well, it is a very loaded question. It is kind of more political thing. But one thing is clear since January 2018, when Pakistan was first, it was first. There was kind of indication that Pakistan would be grey listed subsequently, and that had happened. And at that time, the then Finance Minister Dr. Mifta Ismail, he had given a statement that it was a political decision by the FATF to place Pakistan on the grey list, because the kind of demands that these countries were making to Pakistan and the kind of the action plan, the 27-point action plan that Pakistan was forced to agree upon, was something that cannot be achieved in a period of 1.5 years. And we have seen that because of that reason, we could deliver only on 2 points. Although we cannot absolve our own institutions and the departments from their responsibility, but having said that, most of these things were kind of political in nature. And one thing is clear: Pakistan can only deliver on certain commitments, where the circumstances are in its control. If something is happening in Afghanistan, no organization can bring those kind of outfits under certain control. It is the responsibility of the government of Pakistan to take control of the things on its territory, and it is the responsibility of the government of Pakistan and its law enforcement agencies to bring the things under control as far as Pakistani territory is concerned. Yes, there are issues, and today in a meeting of the National Assembly Standing Committee on Finance, the former Finance Minister, Mr. Asad Umar, who had remained involved in these FATF negotiations, and he had met with plenary co-chair, who's a U.S. Under Secretary of State, when he visited U.S. in April this year. What Mr. Umar said, that the kind of standard that the world is asking Pakistan to meet, no country in the world has even met those standards, even in the developed countries. So it is all political. If now it depends upon to what an extent we are able to convince our international partners to accept our position, but the test will be in September or October this year.
All right. Thank you very much, Abbas Rana, for the information you shared with us. Now, Raja Saab, it is generally believed, we were having a discussion a few days ago also on the same issue. They believe that if elections are held, if, there's a big if, the Taliban won't be able to grab many seats. So if you're talking about a proper democratic solution, so you don't see them because it's a small faction, but a powerful one. But if elections are not held, they also want some power sharing. Do you think that formula is going to be a working formula there? Because there seems to be a lot of conflict of interest. For example, if they want an Islamic state, Afghanistan is already an Islamic state. Now we are talking about another version, which the Taliban believe that if a woman is walking and heels are making some sort of noise, she should be killed, or she should be beaten for that matter. And we've seen such cases there. Don't you think that is going to be the actual bone of contention, sir, where the problem seems to be? Because culture versus religion versus the current condition.
Well, thank you, Faisal. To be very frank, at this moment of time, this Afghan imbroglio have more questions than answers. There are a lot of questions, and everyone is befuddled and clueless what is going to happen, because American drawdown from this region, it is going to have profound implications, and which are very obvious, because it is going to lead to a power vacuum. And we had seen this happening when Soviet they were defeated, and Americans, they left this region in a hurry, and Afghanistan was left at the mercy of the warlords. And then we came across some blood feuds, and something which was pretty horrendous. What are going to be the reasonable terms and conditions? You need to understand a fact that Taliban this time, they are negotiating from the point of strength.
Exactly.
They also know the fact that Americans, they want a way out from Afghanistan, and Trump administration it wants to call a day for Afghanistan with a limited presence, but not very with extended stakes. In that,
is that limited presence acceptable to the Taliban?
Yeah, that is the point, because
and the time frame also.
And in the time frame also, and what I always Faisal believe, that When it comes to Pakistan's role in Afghanistan, it is my perception, and one has every right to disagree to it. I think it was always over expectation from United States and over commitment from our own side. This region has
Have
been.
we all already overcommitted, sir?
But
during this
that's my
visit?
fear. That's my fear, and I apprehend that. Reason being because you see, this region is repudiated from peace for centuries. It is, in with this last 1 century, this is the third major invasion in Afghanistan. Britain and Soviet, and now United States of America. So this region has the niceties of its own. It has its own cultural intricacies. It has a lot of things which are uncommon. So, but having said all of these things, what I believe is that when Taliban, they would further negotiate onto these terms of settlement, I think in the first place they might go with that demand, because they believe that power was snatched from their hands. So they might demand an outright return of power into their own hands. So you never know this.
What is that supposed to mean? It means, to me, infighting, more infighting actually.
Yeah, that is another thing. But and again, you might come across another demand of wartime reparation. They might ask, because it was an illegitimate incursion into Afghanistan, so Americans, they should be paying reparation for that matter, or for the rebuilding of Afghanistan, because it had caused a lot of destruction and a lot of obliteration which Afghanistan
But
had
sir,
to
if you look at,
suffer.
for example, let me give you another example. Egypt, Morsi had a legitimate government. He was ousted, now he's dead.
Yes.
And the kind of torture he went through, we all know. A legitimate government of Muslim Brotherhood. And then General Sisi took over. Now he's enjoying the power. So Americans can do anything if they want to.
Yes,
But in Afghanistan, when you look at it from Pakistani point of view, sir, Pakistan, I think, is one of those countries which has been suffering for a very long time because of the two invasions.
And to be frank, Faisal, American liberal ideals, they are dwindling for vis-a-vis Afghanistan. They just simply seek a way out, and something which should be a reasonable face saving from where they could, Trump could go into the next election with that thing that, look, I have solved the Afghan issue. So they are not very much interested in actually taking the responsibility of Afghanistan for the time to come, and that is going to be having some very catastrophic impinging for Pakistan as well, because you see, if Americans, they decide to leave Afghanistan with that kind of detest, or say with that kind of half-hearted presence within Afghanistan. So, and while putting more onus on Pakistan, like it is, like I said earlier, that I apprehend that Pakistan might have overcommitted while in this particular visit. So then things, they can go either way, because the Trump administration, it means business, and they would, Trump, you see, his tone was very vitriolic when it came to Pakistan when he assumed the power. But gradually, when he needed Pakistan, his tone was altogether different, and his treatment to Pakistan's delegation had been something very unexpected, even to the Pakistan's delegation. But what if peace does not return to Afghanistan, and what if Trump gets elected again? So Pakistan, I think it is the high time where Pakistan should meticulously review its all policy options.
All right. Ambassador Saab, yesterday in our program, we had Ghalib Iqbal Saab from the Foreign Office, and he in fact shared something pretty interesting. He said that I fear that if they are vacating from Afghanistan, most likely the new target is now Iran. And if a war breaks out between Iran and USA, because Trump has called that a rogue state, they need to be fixed, they are playing with fire, and he has got some very hostile intentions towards them. You think, sir, this entire, just in case, just giving you an idea, just in case if that happens, you believe, and it might happen maybe in another 6 to 8, maybe 10 months, that is totally going to destroy the peace process in Afghanistan, sir. The new misadventure or adventure, or whatever you may call it. So, sir, don't you think that the Americans need to also understand that fiddling with Iran is not going to serve the purpose? Because again, Pakistan is bordering Iran, Afghanistan is bordering Iran, and the entire region is going to get engulfed again, sir.
I agree. Iran, I think, would be a tough call for the Americans also. It's not so easy. But from Afghanistan, they have made up their mind. They want to withdraw because in doing so, they'll save around $50 billion a year. And Mr. Trump is a businessman, and for him, this is quite a lucrative proposition to withdraw. And this is very important for him. And he has to show something during his election campaign, which is just a year and a half away, that what he has achieved. And second achievement, he might like to show to the public there that I have called back my boys, so American soldiers would be back. So there'll be a psychological as well as financial benefit to the United States if it withdraws. But withdrawal will have its own repercussions. Afghan society, if you talk about culture-wise, except for Zahir Shah's 4 decades of peace, Afghanistan has never seen peace before Zahir Shah, and after Zahir Shah, we all know what is happening. And if history is a guide, then you will have to see that, and especially when the power politics at the moment in Afghanistan is among the warlords, drug lords, and Taliban. They are the 3 major factions. Warlords are sustained by the drug lords. Even Taliban are a beneficiary from the drug trade. So it's not a matter of ideology. When we talk about Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, which was Afghanistan's claim, Taliban's claim, and if we talk about, say, the present dispensation, both are Islamic in character. And but when you go deeper into that, so it's actually a power struggle. And right now, Taliban, they have the upper hand because they...
Despite being small in numbers.
Fine, but the other side is disjointed, disunited, and indulged in nepotism, corruption. So even if you have a power like India, if this is the situation, Taliban would still have the upper hand. So this is, we have to understand the dynamics inside Afghanistan. And then when Taliban, if they think they will be enjoying the major share in the cake, and if they say they have learned lessons during the past 19, 18 years, or if they say that they will also share power with it, all they have to quantify, because what do they mean by this power sharing and all that? And that's why this is the biggest hurdle at the moment, which is making people nervous, that what kind of power sharing are they talking about when the Americans, they withdraw from Afghanistan. Secondly, when they say that they will not allow extremists and terrorists to misuse Afghanistan soil, they'll have to give foolproof guarantees for that. And there have been reports that Taliban have been contesting with those groups also. ISIS group, Daesh, they have been. And those are mostly, in fact, the disgruntled Taliban converted into ISIS and Daesh or joining them. This is also there. But of course, non-Afghan ISIS members are also there. But there is also a very intriguing observation about the presence of ISIS in Afghanistan, in a place which is alien to them, and how come they could make roots there, how they were brought in. There is a big question.
Obviously, there is some power which is supporting
So
them,
I think
them,
Russians
and those who have brought them here actually.
Russians have, so we have to look into the sinister designs also, that even if Americans withdraw, we have to fend for ourselves and we have to be very, very careful whatever dispensation takes over in Afghanistan. We should try to curb our enthusiasm. There's no need to be euphoric about the withdrawal, because we are living in a system where we are all dependent to each other. You just talked about FATF right now.
Sir?
It is what? What is this? It is actually the extremists, extremists where they are living, or they have been living, or they had links. Actually, those countries are being targeted. Pakistan is one of them. If you look at the list of those countries which are on the grey list or something, or which are on the other side of the fence, they are on the grey. Whether it's Iran may not have
and Korea,
that
basically,
number
North
of
Korea.
Al-Qaeda. They may not have the number of Al-Qaeda or others. They still have the relationship with them. But since they are on the other side of the fence, so they have to be, put under pressure. But Pakistan has elaborate laws also. We are short of on certain laws on FATF, but at the same time we have a legislation, we have laws, and we are open to discussion, which in the case of North Korea or in the case of Iran, there are many, many difficulties they are facing. That's and then they are the revolutionary setups. We are not the revolutionary setup.
All right, sir.
Just one point.
Quick point, sir.
For us, we have to be very careful whenever the new dispensation takes over in Afghanistan. This is my advice to all of us.
All right. Now, Avim Saab, quick comment on this current situation. So, where the foreign minister, who has also been the foreign minister in People's Party's government, he believes that all the political parties should be on the same page. And at least when it comes to the foreign policy, everybody should give the input. Do you think that's possible under the current circumstances?
Well, this is a serious and a very significant weakness that Pakistan has been suffering for the last several years. That it is economically and politically weak. And a country's leadership is seen, heard, and responded to according to the political strength that it has. And wisely, the Prime Minister had that so-called Pakistani-style jalsa in their arena in Washington, and that actually demonstrated to the American intelligentsia, media, think tanks, Congress, Senate, and to the White House and to the Pentagon, that here is a political leader of Pakistan who has a voluntary support of such an extent. Hence, as I said, he was seen, he was heard, and he was responded to. And
he was taken seriously because of that. Yes.
So that is why, if our political parties can have that kind of maturity, that while they have their own party lines, while they have their own party interests, but it is the national interest which must be foremost. And if they can have that kind of understanding, then I guess, which is the need of the hour, then I guess our leadership, whichever it be, whatever party it be, will be taken seriously the world over. And I think that was the reason that since 2001, Pakistan was put in a corner, and ever since then we have been always trying to explain to the world that we are not a country which is exporting terrorism.
We have been on the back foot. That's true.
And it is for the first time now, after 19 years, that the world is willing to listen to us.
That's a great achievement as far as your foreign policy is concerned.
It took us 19 years. It took us 19 years. We had to demonstrate to the world that here is a leadership which has a public support, and this is what the stance is.
All right. All right. Now, since a very important question is mentioned here, that support. Imran Khan Sahib, sir, since it's been in power for almost 10 months, 9 months, 11 months maybe, he has demonstrated one thing very, very clearly, that wherever he has gone as a Prime Minister, whether it's Saudi Arabia or it's UAE or Qatar or China or USA for that matter, even Malaysia, this man was greeted very well, and this man was respected, and everybody appreciated his efforts. A one-man show, basically. Now, since he seems to be very committed, and we have seen that the military and the current government, they're like this at the moment, and this is a great sign. But looking at PMLN for that matter in shambles, People's Party, they have their own issues to look after. And looking at the recent result in FATA for that matter, where one political party got 1% and the other got 3%, PMLN and People's Party. That has also shown, I mean, I won't say FATA is the right area to gauge, but it does represent that 5 seats were won by Pakistan People's Party and rest were mostly, 3 were from JUI and then independent candidates. So that also reflects the kind of attitude the people have at the moment, sir. Do you think that PTI currently is leading from the front now?
Well, yes, there are striking successes which they had clinched. And with regard to foreign policy, I think top of the list is the way they have been able to diffuse the Indian propaganda which had been built around in last 1 decade. Because India had cultivated and nurtured a narrative in past 1 decade, and that was primarily Pakistan centric and was aimed at isolating Pakistan from the mainstream, with an extended presence in Afghanistan, and by having a close strategic angling with the Washington. So all of these things, they are now going other way, and this is something which is a very positive inkling. And when it comes to this domestic ambit, I think 1 year is way too less parameter to judge performance of a ruling dispensation, because the issues and the chronic issues which PTI government is facing, economy for that matter, and some other things, misgovernance and all of these things, they would take time to settle down. But overall, if you ask my personal opinion regarding this 1 year of PTI being in office, I think it's a mixed bag where there is more optimism, and we can think they would be able to pull the tide, and they would able to in fact turn the tide, and they would try to deliver, because at the end of the day their survival, it hinges on this very notion of their deliverance, because they had created an ecstatic, and that kind of narrative and a euphoria in their support base. If they are not going to deliver, they would die down. So it is a kind of a trap in which they are in, and they will have to deliver, and that's the good thing, and that I think is the prerequisite of the democracy as well, that you have to deliver.
All right. Thank you very much, Asap. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much, Asap. In fact, if you look at the recent happenings in Pakistan, whether you talk about Balochistan, there was this patrolling vehicle which was attacked, came under fire, a captain along with 4 other soldiers lost their lives. You talk about Waziristan, again, 4 soldiers lost their lives. Yesterday, rather today at 2 a.m., another very unfortunate incident in which an aviation plane fell down, killing 2 colonels along with 3 other military support staff, and unfortunately it fell on a residential area and about 30 people died there as well. But when we look at, this was an accident, but the previous 2 ones basically seems to be indicating towards another very important area, and that is that India is going to go after creating more problems for Pakistan, destabilizing Pakistan, attacking our soldiers, whether you talk about the soft targets or the hard targets. And that is the dirtiest role of India, where they've been killing innocent civilians. And this is something very important, needs to be sorted, because if you look at the current circumstances, it seems that Pakistan will have a lot of issues because of this, because we have already faced all this. But anyway, I'll see you again tomorrow at 8. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.